series cards, which will come in GTX 1060, 1070, and 1080 variants, will not be replacing the current ACX cards. The issue with the ACX cards has been resolved, they're still for sale, and these ICX cards will probably cost $20 to $30 more. Here is what that extra money will get you though. First off, of course, as mentioned, they're going to be available in 1070, 1060, and 1080 varieties. I have the 1080 for the win 2 right here, and you'll notice 2 after the different typical naming schemes from EVGA to indicate ICX, as well as, of course, ICX logos on the box. Now, these GPUs have 9 sensors that are integrated onto the PCB. They're specifically geared to test the GPU temperature, providing additional thermal probes beyond what's already there in the GPU itself. Power and memory areas as well. The new PCB design allows these sensors to be placed in close proximity to those heat-generating components because, especially if you look at NVIDIA GPUs over the past few years, they've gotten very efficient, and in fact, the GPU is not always the hottest part of the graphics card anymore. In fact, VRMs and memory can overheat as well, so keeping tabs on the temperatures for those critical components is very important. So we're going to check and monitor these temperatures via MCUs or microcontrol units, and they've scattered these across the board. These are programmable from my understanding, and they can actually do lots of different things. So whereas right now they're being used for things like temperature control and reactive lighting on the board, they could be programmed potentially to do other things as well. Another advancement is asynchronous fans. They actually have separated their fans so that the left one is primarily there and tied to GPU temperatures, and it's actually going to be more directly cooling the GPU as well. And then the right fan is actually going to be tied to your memory and your power temperatures. The upshot to that is that if your GPU starts to get hot, the left fan will spin up. If your memory or your VRM start to get hot, the right fan will spin up. And then of course, if everything starts to heat up, if you have the card under serious load, they'll both spin up, but they'll spin at different speeds, and you can actually control them individually. There's 2 separate fan curves available in the Precision X OC software, so you can have control over both of those and tune them to your heart's content. EVGA also redesigned the base plate and the back plate for this card. They are die-cast and they are form-fitted so that they can make more contact with the different heat-generating parts of the GPU. So they're going to actually act more as heat sinks now. Base plates and back plates have been able to do this to some extent in the past, but EVGA has expanded on their design, making more direct contact with those vital components and creating what they're calling pin fins, just to create a little bit more surface area on the base plate itself. And that should theoretically allow more heat to be sunk into those heat sinks, and of course dissipate air flows over it. They've also redesigned the actual aluminum fin stack itself. They have created what they're calling a half-open design, so kind of L-shaped fins. They're staggered. That's to allow both more surface area, but to also allow the air to flow through there a little bit more easily. When doing side-by-side comparisons with the old before the wind design, they noticed that they would get actual pushback from the fans as they were pushing air onto the fins, whereas this allows the air to flow through it more easily, so you don't get that bounce-back effect from the fans trying to actually cool the fins off. You also have more direct airflow, and it can flow through the fin holes that are there as well. Just this little hole staggered throughout those fins. Again, more airflow, and according to EVGA's testing, also lower temperatures you're going to get because of that. They've integrated a safety fuse onto the board as well. This one seems to have limited actual usage in my personal opinion. It's really there as a worst case scenario failsafe. If you spill solder all over the back of your graphics card and then you try to power it on or something, that fuse should pop before more vital components overheat. So it could, again, in those extreme worst case scenarios, maybe prevent a fire in your computer, but it's not something that's like user serviceable or anything like that. If that fuse goes, you're probably going to have to RMA the board, but it may allow EVGA to do more recovery from RMAs and cards that actually do fail. Now again, just to point out, the ACX coolers will still be around along with the ICX coolers. The ACX coolers will be a little bit less expensive, and you can expect the ICX cooler-based GPUs to be about $20 to $30 more. So let's talk some testing next, and first I wanted to share just some of the footage that I had of EVGA's test setup, because they did have some FLIR cameras there, and they were doing actual visual thermal load testing. Basically, they had a For the Win card set up right next to a For the Win 2 card. They had the cameras pointed at the back, both the cards were running at the same frequency, running the same test, and visually you could look at the thermal readouts and tell that yes, the For the Win 2 cards are staying cooler. We can assume that is due to the design integration of the additional cooling components, in particular when you're looking at the backplate, because that is where some of their issues came up with the previous For the Win card. Now, I was able to do some load testing myself, just some basic tests running Unigine Heaven, and I found that with everything at stock, the GPU was hitting 71 degrees Celsius, the power was at 70 degrees Celsius, memory was about 72 degrees Celsius, and those were fluctuating within a few degrees of each other. But if you look at the new EVGA Precision X OC software, and they've delivered us an early version of it here, you can immediately see the difference in that you have GPU temp, power temp, and memory temp right there. They've also put little checkboxes, well not checkboxes, but color boxes right next to them. And that is because you can control these temperatures by simply going, well, as long as you get into the advanced functions, which I've forgotten how to get to. Here's that fan curve. I believe they need to update this because the drop down isn't working properly to select either one, but here's where you would be able to select either fan and control it. Again, we're working with a fairly early revision of the software. And then here in the advanced tabs section, you can see that you can control still the appearance LED, and they should add some more versions to this, I think. I like demo 1, that's usually what I go with. Thermal LED right here, though, is what you have some additional control over as well. So the thermal LEDs are 3 separate LEDs that they've integrated onto the cooler. They're all labeled G, P, and M, so you have one for G for GPU, P for power, M for memory. So I started off having it set to follow badge color, so it just means it'll set it up and match with the colors that the rest of the RGB LEDs are showing. If you want it to be matchy-matchy, you can assign it an ambient color, so if you just specifically want to tell each of those LEDs what to do, you can do that as well. Or you can do the bit more practical means of showing temperature color here with those. So as you can see, you set a temperature range for each item, and then it will change the color of the LEDs, so you can get a quick visual look at what's going on with your graphics card without even needing to know too much or look at on-screen utilities or something like that. So right now it's set to be blue when it's pretty cool, and then once it gets above 60, it'll turn green. And then if it hits 83 or more, it'll turn red, indicating, hey, it's too hot right now. You need to turn up your case fans or something like that. Beyond that, all of the other functions that you might have come to expect when it comes to the EVGA utility are still there. You can still overclock just as you did before. You still have access to sensors. And, actually, speaking of sensors, you don't still have access. You now have access to sensors as well, though. And here's a quick look at that. We can see the memory sensors here. These are actually on the front side, or the side of the PCB that the cooler is on. And then we also have more sensors that are arrayed on the back side. 5 over here for power. That one that's added for GPU, and of course those 3 for memory. And we can see the individual temperature of all of those. If you want overclock and everything like usual, you still have all of those abilities here, the fan curves, saving your profiles, all that good stuff. So this is an enhancement to the Precision X OC utility, and it seems to be fairly functional from at least as far as I've played around with it so far. Speaking more realistically and a little bit more critically though, they're not using new GPUs. They're still GTX 1080 GPUs or 1070 or 1060, whatever the case may be for the card that you might happen to get. So we're not looking at a vast difference, or really any even significant difference when it comes to actual performance. I did attempt some overclocking with this card, and I found that it overclocked just about the same as most of the other GTX 1080s that I've tried. I was able to hit 2050 megahertz pretty stable with everything set to stock. I cranked the fans up to about 2000 RPMs, which did add some noise, but brought the temperatures down by about 10 degrees, so instead of hovering around 70s, low 70s, they were hovering around low 60s. That did allow me to get about 25 megahertz more when it came to my overclock, so about 2075. But again, you're not looking at night and day difference. You shouldn't be expecting to get these cards and suddenly you're going to get 200, 300, 400 megahertz more, unless you're doing some really crazy cooling stuff with them, or going crazy with the voltage or that kind of thing. I didn't go that far when it comes to testing. The other thing that you want to bear in mind is that, again, those other cards are still available. So if you're considering an ICX card, you should really consider what you want, and don't buy it because you're expecting it to be insanely faster than the other 1080s that are there on the market. Buy it because you like the technology. Buy it because you like the concept of keeping better tabs on which different parts of your card are getting hotter. or buy it because you like the basic concept that EVGA has come up with here. I asked them very specifically, do you think NVIDIA is going to start taking any of these ideas that you've integrated and possibly integrating them into Founders Editions or making them standard across cards? They couldn't really comment on that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit more active monitoring of the different areas of the graphics card, especially if it helps keep things stable by adjusting fan speeds or just more active cooling when it comes to those hot spots like VRMs and memory, the other stuff you don't always consider besides the GPU. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. This has been a quick introduction and some brief testing of the ICX cooler. As mentioned, I was there with quite a few other tech journalists as well as YouTubers, so I'm going to actually dig up their stuff that they've been writing as well. I'm sure there's more testing that's been going on besides just what I've gone over. So I'll post links to their content in the description down below. And then I am planning on using this ICX-based EVGA GTX 1080 for the Win 2 in my February builds. So stay tuned for that too, and I'll be doing some additional testing with it. So if you have any ideas, specific things you want to see me work out, please leave those comments down in the comment section below. Thank you as always for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.
What's going on, everyone? Jay's 2 cents here, and it's been a while since I've gotten to do any sort of graphics card review because we're kind of deep into the life cycle of what's currently out. So I was super excited when EVGA told me they're launching a new graphics card, so I didn't have to go turn tricks on the corner to get my fix anymore. But I digress, that's a conversation for another video. But we got a chance to go to the EVGA headquarters and check out the new For the Win 2 GTX 1080, which is featuring their new ICX cooler. I say ICX cooler, but trust me when I say there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. It is not just a cooler. We're going to talk about that today.
Fine by me. Shake it off, Valeera.
Place where evil can hide from my gaze. Hero returns to
I'm gone.
those imbeciles ruined our fort.
That gives me an idea. Don't have an effect.
Now last week I had the opportunity of going in a behind the scenes tour at EVGA's headquarters where they showed us like the RMA center, the testing center, the packaging. I got to hang out with some of my friends like Paul and Kyle and Steven with Gamers Nexus, and we all got to get really hands-on with this. So trust me when I say that there's a lot of information here. I apologize if there's too much information in this video or it's too long. I'll try and condense it. So make sure you guys check out their coverage too, because it's always good to get multiple perspectives on a single topic. After all, we all know I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Now on the surface, the ICX cooler and the ACX cooler are very difficult to distinguish, but trust me when I say it's what's underneath that is really different here. Now we're going to talk about three things here about this major design. We're going to talk about the new cooler, we're going to talk about the PCB, and we're also going to talk about software. I'm not going to be doing any game benchmarks on this. It's still a 1080. It's still going to have the very same performance that you saw before, although maybe a little bit less throttling. So we're not going to be doing any game benchmarks. Today I'm focusing simply on a teardown and temperatures. Now the heat fin array found on the ICX actually has these holes drilled all the way through it, which allow air to kind of escape through the heatsink going sideways as well as moving air through it. So it's supposed to give a little bit more efficient cooling capability and also a little bit more efficient airflow. And trust me when I say that you can indeed feel the air coming off the back of the card, especially when it's under load, more so than I could with the back of this card, which is completely solid and blocked off. Air can't really get out the sides very well at all. Now underneath the heatsink is also a very different design when it comes to the base plate. The VRM is definitely a forethought when it comes to cooling, because now you have these sort of heat spires, we'll call them. It's not really a heat sink, but they're definitely heat spires that are designed to pull heat through the plate, get it up into the airflow, and give you better VRM cooling. Now EVGA's solution to the thermal issue was by putting heat pads between the heat sink and the top of the base plate, which does indeed touch the VRM. It's just it didn't have anything on top of the base plate to dissipate the heat. So the thermal pads though did increase the cooling efficiency quite a bit. But the problem is the heat sink that it's touching is not flat on the bottom, it's pointy. So there's a lot less surface area that could have been there in the first place. So what EVGA did on the ICX cooler was they sort of bent the fins to make them a little bit flat, so where it actually touches the thermal pad is giving you much more efficient transfer of heat now. Also too, the heat sink that's directly on top of the GPU, the bottom of that was completely flat and closed off. Well, now they actually have 50% of airflow that can actually travel through that and get down to the base plate as well, which gives you much better cooling for the memory. So it's quite a bit different on the heat sink, although it looks very similar on the surface. Now moving on to the back of the graphics card, you can see the original backplate was a very nice piece of machined aluminum. It had some vents where it mattered, but again, where the back of the VRMs were was also a vent. It didn't have the greatest contact in mind when it came to the back side of the power delivery. Now remember, heat radiates in multiple directions, not just one direction. So heat coming off the back of the card was also an afterthought. So what they've done is they actually created a bit of a heat sink built into the backplate, which is separate down the middle, so you don't get as much heat contamination from the GPU side of things moving over to the VRM side. So obviously it's working with that very defined limitation of heat transfer from the VRM. Now before I talk about temperatures, let's talk about my testing methodology. I use an open air test bench because I want the only factor on the temperature of the graphics card to be the cooler itself. There's no way I could put any case on here that's going to account for all real-world scenarios. So right now, the only factor on what the temperatures are on the graphics card are what the limitations of the cooler itself are. So I'm not going to address any of the open air test bench comments in this video. You guys can go and check out this one up here. I actually tested open air test bench versus a closed case with the same GPU to see what the differences are. You can have the conversation over there if you want it. Now on the flip side, having an open air test bench actually makes negative results when it comes to things like backplate testing and seeing if this new backplate design is going to be efficient, because there is zero airflow happening over the backplate. There's no case fans moving air. Usually your case fans are blowing directly on your GPU, especially if you have a side case fan. So that was something to keep in mind. So I did do testing without any airflow, and then I also tested with a fan on there to see what the differences would be. So now with all of that out of the way, let's talk about how well this design really works. Now with the new Precision X, you can actually monitor power delivery, GPU temperature, and memory temperature. So you have full control over what's going on in your system. And you can actually set temperature indicators where you can change the color of those LEDs to kind of tell you what's going on at a glance if you can see your graphics card through your window. If you don't want those on, just set the color to black and they won't even be there. Now at idle, we were seeing power delivery temperatures sitting in the mid-30s. Perfectly acceptable, it's where I would expect it to be. But once I put it under load, we saw temperatures go up into the low 70s, which sounds like a lot. MOSFETs are typically rated up to something like 120C, so we are well below that threshold. but that's because obviously now we have cooling on both the back plate and the front plate that's giving us active cooling to the VRMs. It's doing a fantastic job. Now I also used my thermal imaging camera for this test because the matte black back plate was perfect emissivity for this test, and I was surprised to see that we actually were within 1 or 2 degrees of the temperatures that were being shown for the GPU on Precision OC. I wasn't expecting that. So I was kind of happy. That made me go, yay, the thermal testing's actually worth doing. But that also got me thinking, in cases like I mentioned earlier, typically there's airflow that moves over the backplate. So how well is that going to work? So I took a 1000 RPM fractal design fan, put it about the distance away the front case fan would be, and had it blow air towards the GPU. It's not a huge stream of air. It's a 1000 RPM fan. It's not a high CFM fan. It's just a steady, slight breeze on the back of it. And check this out. Temperatures actually came down to where they matched what was actually showing on Precision XOC. So that was very good. One, it sort of validated the temperature sensors and saying, yeah, this is legit temperature. And two, it made the use of the FLIR just completely valid. So I was happy about that. So I think that makes all the emissivity gurus out there satisfied. At least I would hope so. But Jay, I like to overclock my graphics cards. What's gonna happen if I do that? Well guys, I got good news, because fortunately there's a separate fan curve for VRMs as well, which will override any fan curve you have going on for the GPU, because guess what? The fans are separate. The right fan on top of the power delivery is independent from the left fan, and it will do its own thing based on VRM temperature, and the left fan can be set directly to GPU. Now, if you want to link them together, you can. But I think it's really neat that you have a system that overrides it and says, hey, once we hit 74C on the VRM, let's start speeding up the fans a little bit to keep things as cool as possible. And the temperatures that you saw right here were all with the factory curve. I didn't change anything, and you could see that we had temperatures that were very, very respectable. So even when I applied a 2088 overclock, I wasn't seeing any additional temperature on the VRM, simply because of the fact that the fans were speeding up to kind of counteract that. Now EVGA tells me they have a temperature target of 74C on the VRM. That can't be changed. That's a safety thing. They've determined that number, so that's where it's going to be. But I also was curious, with an overclock and setting the fans on something manual at like 60% fan speed, sacrificing a little bit of noise, the temperatures on the VRMs came all the way down to the low 60s. Absolutely amazing. The design is clearly working. Now, speaking of safety, some of the photos of the burned PCBs on the ACX fiasco scared EVGA enough to where they actually added a fuse to the PCB that will blow before anything else catches fire or burns. So that's a good, I think all manufacturers should do that. Anything that's got power going through it, in my opinion, should have some sort of a built-in fuse, including me. I blow my fuses all the time. So as you can see, it's quite a bit more than just a new cooler. It's software, it is a cooler, and as well some PCB changes and 9 sensors to keep an eye on what's going on inside of your system. Now at the EVGA press day, we did have some questions. We asked EVGA directly, well, what if you're out of the step up program? Or what if you've already got a For the Win card and you want to step up, but you're outside of that window? Are you just leaving the old owners out to dry? Well, no, what they're doing right now, and you have to get more information on their website. I don't have any of the details, but what they've told us, at least via messaging, is that there's going to be a $99 step-up program to be able to upgrade to a For the Win 2 if you want it. Now, I will say this. I've got 3 of these For the Win cards with the thermal pads applied. I have no problems using it. In fact, I put one inside a friend's system, if you guys remember that. I have full confidence in the ACX 3.0 with the thermal pads applied to it. It's just good to see that EVGA responded to the public outcry about something needing to be done about the design. A company that doesn't listen to its customers is not going to be a company for long, so kudos to EVGA on that one. I think more companies should actually follow suit and listen to what their customers have to say. Apple. But who needs to listen to your customers when you have courage? Anyway guys, time to go. Thanks for watching today's video. Again, make sure you check out the other coverages out there. There was quite a few of us at the press day, so chances are your favorite outlet has probably covered something regarding ICX, so make sure you check them out. Guys, as always, thanks for watching. Tell me what you want me to test moving forward. The Terry Crews build, guys, it's coming, I promise. The last bits and pieces I was waiting on are finally here. It's coming. I just don't want to divulge too much. I want it to be a surprise for the guys, so stop nagging me. All right, time to go. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
There we go. We're live. Oh crap, I forgot to mute the stream. So it's gonna end up doubling back on itself. I gotta wait for it to go live now before I can mute it.
You can always just blame me, Jay. That's general consensus around here.
I always do.
So it's not like they can prove it otherwise.
I'll run the intro. Oh wait, I can mute it now. There we go. Yes, I muted it before it ever made a sound because I'm pro. All right, the intro's going.
Welcome to Tech Talk. Still didn't check the number.